Welcome back to Life Stories Network, where real-life inspired stories come alive, filled with emotions, lessons, and moments that make you reflect on your own life. Today's story is about family, loyalty, respect, and what happens when you're pushed into an impossible situation. It's emotional, it's raw, and it's something many people in blended families will relate to. I never thought I would find myself in the middle of this kind of family drama. Honestly, I always pictured my life going in a much simpler direction: find love, build a home, and raise children in peace. But life rarely goes the way we expect, and sometimes love brings not just joy, but also challenges that test your patience. You're stringed in your sense of self. When I met my wife, I knew she was the one for me. She had this calm energy about her, a strength that drew me in. What made me admire her even more was the way she loved her kids. Two beautiful children, full of energy and life, who clearly adored their mother. And from the beginning, I knew that choosing her meant choosing them too. I was ready for that. I didn't hesitate. Being a step-parent is one of those roles that people don't talk enough about. It's complicated. You're expected to step up, to show love, to be present, and yet at the same time, you're reminded constantly that you are not the real parent. From the very first day, I promised myself I wouldn't try to replace their dad. That was never my goal. What I wanted was to be another supportive adult in their lives. Someone they could trust. Someone who would be there when they needed help or comfort. I went in with an open heart, knowing it would take time for them to accept me fully. And slowly, little by little, we started building something. I was there for school pickups. I clapped for them at their soccer games. I helped them with their projects, and I listened when they wanted to talk about their friends or school drama. We even had little inside jokes that only the three of us shared. I thought, maybe, just maybe, this was working. I wasn't their dad, but I was carving out my own space in their hearts, and that meant everything to me. But there was always a shadow hanging over us, their biological father. From the moment he found out about me, his attitude was clear. He didn't like me, didn't want me around, and made sure everyone knew it. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself, he's just adjusting. It's not easy seeing your kids with another man in their lives. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, but his hostility wasn't just about jealousy. It became a steady stream of negativity directed at me. Whenever he dropped the kids off, he barely looked at me. If he did speak, it was with sarcasm or coldness. Once, I offered him a polite, "Hey, how's it going?" And he shot back, "Better before I had to see you." I swallowed it, for the kids' sake. Another time, he told them in front of me, "Remember, I'm your real dad. Don't let anyone make you forget that." I never once told them otherwise, but he always seemed to think I was plotting to take his place. The hardest part was how his bitterness started seeping into the kids' minds. I noticed little changes. At first, they would tell me funny things about their weekends at their dad's place, but then, slowly, they began repeating things that didn't feel like their own words. One time, my stepson said, "Dad says you're trying too hard." Another time, my stepdaughter mumbled, "Dad doesn't think you should tell us what to do." Those words stung. I never overstepped, but in their father's eyes, every act of care was an intrusion. Still, I kept showing up. I thought that consistency, kindness, and patience would win in the end. I believe that children, as they grow older, can see the truth with their own eyes. And for a while, that gave me strength. But the situation boiled over one weekend in a way I never could have predicted. We were sitting in the living room, just the kids and me. They seemed nervous, whispering to each other like they were preparing for something. Finally, my stepdaughter spoke up. She said, "We think you should apologize to Dad." My heart dropped. I froze, because I couldn't understand why they would say that. I asked them gently, "Apologize? For what?" They exchanged glances, and then my stepson explained, "Dad feels like you disrespect him. He thinks you try to act like him. If you just say sorry, maybe things will be better." I can't even explain the wave of emotions that hit me in that moment. Shock, confusion, sadness, even anger. Here were these kids that I loved, like my own, asking me to bow down to a man who had done nothing but hate me. A man who had never once shown me kindness, who had poisoned their minds against me for years. An apology What for? For caring about them. For driving them to school when their mom was stuck at work. For making them breakfast. Cheering for them. Helping them through tough days. I sat there silently for a few seconds, and I could feel my throat tighten. I wanted to cry, but I knew I couldn't. I had to be calm, so I asked them again. What exactly am I apologizing for? They hesitated. They couldn't give me a clear answer. The only thing they could repeat was, Dad feels like you try to replace him. That night, after they went to bed, I sat on the couch with my wife and poured everything out. I told her how much it hurt, how unfair it felt, how lost I was. She held my hand and said, You don't owe him an apology. You've done nothing wrong. You love these kids, and that's something no one should make you feel guilty for. But even with her reassurance, the weight on my chest wouldn't go away, because it wasn't just about the bio dad anymore. It was about the kids. They were carrying his bitterness, bringing it into our home, and trying to make it mine. I couldn't stop thinking, if I don't apologize, will they think I'm the bad guy? Will they believe their father's lies even more? And if I do apologize, what message am I sending? That it's okay to accept disrespect, just to keep the peace. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept racing, replaying their little voices asking me to say sorry. I kept asking myself, was I being stubborn, or was this the moment I had to stand tall, even if it made things harder in the short run? I didn't have the answer yet, but deep down, something in me knew this wasn't just about an apology. It was about dignity, truth, and teaching the kids a lesson. They might not understand now, but would carry with them forever. And that was only the beginning of the storm that was about to unfold. The morning after that heavy conversation with the kids felt like carrying 1,000 pounds on my shoulders. I got up early, made coffee, and just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cup in my hands. I replayed their words over and over. We think you should apologize to Dad. It felt like a dagger that twisted a little deeper every time I thought about it. My wife joined me, still in her robe, hair messy from sleep. She looked at me with soft eyes and asked, Did you sleep at all? I just shook my head. I told her, I can't stop thinking about it. They want me to say sorry. But sorry for what? For existing, for loving them, for being here when he wasn't. My wife reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said firmly, You're not wrong. You've never been wrong about this. You've given them love, stability, and care. That man can't stand it because it makes him look bad. But that's his problem, not yours. Her words comforted me, but only for a moment. Because the truth is, when it comes to kids, perception matters. No matter how much I loved them, if their father's voice was louder in their ears, I would always look like the intruder. That thought made my stomach churn. Later that day, I decided I couldn't leave it hanging in the air. I had to talk to the kids again, not out of anger, but out of love. I wanted them to understand where I was coming from. I found them in the living room, both watching TV, curled up on the couch. I turned it off gently and said, We need to talk. They both looked nervous again, like they knew this wasn't going to be a lighthearted chat. I sat across from them and took a deep breath. I want you to know something, I began. I love you both. That's never going to change. But last night, when you asked me to apologize to your dad, it really hurt me. They looked down at their hands, fidgeting. My stepdaughter whispered, We just want things to be easier. That broke me, because I understood what she meant. She wanted peace. She wanted the fighting, the tension, the unspoken bitterness to stop. She was just a kid, caught in the middle of grown-ups who couldn't get along. I told her gently, I know you want peace. I want that. Fine. But sometimes peace doesn't come from pretending or saying words we don't mean. Sometimes peace comes from standing up for what's right. If I apologized to your dad, I'd be lying. I'd be saying I was wrong to love you, wrong to care for you, wrong to be here. And that's not true. My stepson frowned, but Dad says, You act like you're better than him. That cut deep. I swallowed hard before answering. I've never thought I was better than your dad. He's your father, and I respect that. But I can't control what he feels. I can only control how I act. And I promise you, I've only ever tried to support you and your mom. They didn't say much after that. They just sat there, quiet, processing, and in their silence, I felt the weight of a war I didn't ask for, but was stuck fighting anyway. That evening, when their mom drove them to their dad's house, I could feel the tension in the car. They didn't talk much, and when we said goodbye, their hugs felt weaker than usual. My heart ached the whole drive home. I worried that I was losing them, that no matter how much I tried, their dad's influence was stronger than my love. The next day, my wife's phone buzzed. She looked at it, sighed, and handed it to me. It was a message from her ex. My stomach tightened before I even read it. The text was long, venomous, and filled with accusations. He wrote, "Your husband needs to back off. He's brainwashing my kids. He acts like their father when he's not. If he had any respect, he'd apologize for trying to replace me. Tell him to stay in his lane." My hands trembled as I read it. For a moment, I wanted to unleash every ounce of anger I had bottled up. I wanted to reply, to tear apart his lies, to defend myself. But I didn't. I handed the phone back and muttered, "Unbelievable." My wife said firmly, "Ignore him. He's trying to provoke you. Don't give him the satisfaction." But ignoring wasn't easy. His words echoed in my head all day. Back off. Stay in your lane. What lane? The one where I step aside and let the kids think I don't care. The one where I stop helping, stop loving, stop showing up just so he can feel superior. That wasn't me. I couldn't do that. That night, I sat alone in the living room with the lights off, just thinking. I thought about my own father growing up how. He wasn't perfect, but he was present. He showed up. He made me feel valued. And I thought, that's all I'm trying to do for these kids. Be present. Show up. Make them feel valued. Why was that such a crime? The more I thought about it, the more I realized the apology wasn't about making peace. It was about control. Their dad wanted me to bow down, to make myself smaller, so he could stand taller in their eyes. But what would that teach the kids? That you should accept disrespect just to avoid conflict. That love requires you to shrink yourself for someone else's ego. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. But that didn't mean things would get easier. In fact, the storm was only beginning. A few days later, the kids returned to our house. I could feel the tension the moment they walked in. My stepson barely made eye contact. My stepdaughter looked uncomfortable. Something had shifted. At dinner, I tried to make small talk, asking about school, friends, their favorite shows. Their answers were short, clipped. Then, out of nowhere, my stepson said, "Dad said you're not really part of the family." The room fell silent. My wife dropped her fork, and my chest tightened like someone had wrapped a chain around it. I looked him in the eye and asked softly, "Do you believe that?" He shrugged. "I don't know." "You're not." Those words crushed me. Not because they weren't true. I knew I wasn't his biological father, but because of how much they hurt coming from his mouth. I wanted to shout, to cry, to beg him to see me for who I really was. But instead, I stayed calm. "You're right," I said. "I'm not your dad, but I care about you like you're my own, and that will never change." The rest of the meal was quiet. I excused myself early and went upstairs, my heart heavy. I felt like I was fighting a battle I couldn't win. Like no matter how much love I poured into this family, their father's hate would always drown it out. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. I wasn't going to give up, not on my wife, not on these kids, and not on myself. I just didn't know yet what the next chapter of this fight would look like. The night after that painful dinner, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, but inside my head, it was anything but. My stepson's words echoed over and over. "You're not Dad." I knew he didn't mean it out of cruelty. He was a kid repeating what he had been told. Still, it cut deeper than anything his father could have ever said directly to me. Primera Roldaubert looked at my wife and whispered, "What if he's right?" What if I'm not part of this family the way I thought? She opened her eyes, sighed, and turned to face me. Listen to me, she said firmly. You are my partner. You are in this family because you love us. Biology doesn't define. Family love does. Don't ever let him convince you otherwise. Her words soothed me for the moment, but the doubt lingered like a stubborn shadow. The next morning, I made pancakes for the kids like I usually did on weekends. I thought maybe a little normalcy would help. My stepdaughter smiled faintly when I added chocolate chips to hers, but my stepson barely touched his plate. When I asked if he was okay, he shrugged and muttered, "Dad says you're just pretending." My chest ached, but I forced myself to smile and said, "Well, even if I'm pretending, I'm a pretty good cook, right?" He cracked the tiniest smile, and for a split second, I felt hope. But later that day, the storm I'd been dreading finally hit. The doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, there he was, their dad. Arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes burning with hostility. "We need to talk," he said, pushing his way past me without waiting for an invitation. My wife hurried into the room. Startled, "What are you doing here?" she demanded. He ignored her and turned straight to me. You need to stop playing house with my kids." His words were sharp, each one dripping with venom. I tried to stay calm. "I've never tried to replace you. I've only tried to support them." He stepped closer, his voice rising. "Support? You mean control? You act like you're their father. You make them forget about me. And now you've got them feeling guilty if they don't side with you. I won't stand for it." My wife stepped between us, her voice firm. "That's enough. He's done nothing but love those kids. Don't twist it." But he wasn't hearing any of it. He jabbed a finger toward me. "If you respect me at all, you'll apologize. Right here, right now. Admit you've overstepped." The air felt thick, the tension almost suffocating. My stepchildren had come downstairs by now, standing quietly on the stairs, watching. Their wide eyes told me everything they had been waiting for this moment, dreading it, fearing it. I looked at them, then back at their father. My chest was tight, but I knew I had to stand my ground. "No," I said simply. His face turned red. "What did you just say?" I spoke louder, clearer. I said, "No, I'm not going to apologize for being there for your kids. I'm not going to apologize for loving them. I've never disrespected you. I've never tried to take your place, but I will not shrink myself just to soothe your ego." For a moment, the room was silent. You could hear the kids breathing on the stairs, my wife's shaky sigh, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Then he exploded. "You, arrogant, you think you're some kind of hero? You're nothing. Nothing to them. You'll never be me." I wanted to shout back, to let out all the anger that had been building for years. But instead, I lowered my voice and said, "You're right. I'll never be you, but that doesn't mean I'm nothing, and it doesn't erase what I've done and will continue to do for them." He glared at me like he wanted to throw a punch, but my wife stepped in again, her voice cold as steel. "Get out. Right now. Before this goes any further." He stormed toward the door, but not before spitting out, "This isn't over. They'll see you for who you really are." And with that, he slammed the door behind him, rattling the frame. The kids hurried down the stairs, their faces pale. My stepdaughter asked in a trembling voice, "Why does Dad hate you so much?" I knelt down to her level, my throat tight, and said softly, "Because sometimes, when people are hurting, they blame others instead of facing their own pain. But you need to know this, I don't hate him. I just refuse to be treated like I don't matter." My stepson stayed quiet, his eyes darting between me and the door. I could see the conflict in him, the tug of loyalty to his dad, the pull of the bond we had built. He didn't say a word, but the tears in his eyes told me everything. That night, after the kids were in bed, my wife sat beside me on the couch. She whispered, "You did the right thing." I shook my head. Did I? Or did I just make things worse for them? She looked me straight in the eye. "Worse for now. Maybe." but you showed them strength. You showed them what it means to stand up for yourself with dignity. That's something they'll remember. Her faith in me kept me going, but I couldn't shake the image of my stepson's teary eyes. I knew this wasn't over. Their father would keep poisoning them, keep twisting the story. But deep inside, I also knew I couldn't cave. If I gave him what he wanted, it wouldn't be the last demand. It would only be the beginning. Days passed, and the atmosphere in the house was tense. The kids were quieter, more withdrawn. They spent more time in their rooms, less time laughing with me. It was like a wall was slowly being built between us, brick by brick, and I didn't know how to stop it. One evening, I found my stepdaughter crying in her room. I sat down beside her and asked gently, "What's wrong?" She wiped her tears and whispered, "I don't know what to do. I love Dad, but I don't want you to hate him, and I don't want him to hate you." My heart broke hearing her say that. I pulled her into a hug and said, "Sweetheart, I don't hate him. I never will. But sometimes adults don't get along, and that's not your fault. You don't have to choose between us. You can love him and still let me love you too." She nodded, still sniffling. "But he says you don't belong." I kissed the top of her head and whispered, "Belonging isn't about what someone says. It's about showing up every day, no matter what. And I promise you, I'm not going anywhere." When she finally fell asleep, I sat in the dark room for a while, just watching her breathe, silently praying that one day, the kids would see the truth for themselves. And deep down I knew this wasn't just a fight with their father, it was a test of what kind of man I was going to be. Weak and apologetic, just to keep the peace. Or strong and steady, even if it meant being misunderstood. The answer was becoming clearer with every painful moment. I couldn't bow down. Not now. Not ever. Welcome back to Life Stories Network, where real voices and real emotions take center stage. If you've been following this journey, you know by now that family dynamics can get messy, especially when step-parents are involved. And today's story is proof of just how complicated love, loyalty, and resentment can become when old wounds refuse to heal. Let's pick up where we left off. I had thought that after the big blow-up in the kitchen, where I told the kids I wasn't apologizing to their father, things would calm down. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I was too hopeful. Because what happened next made me realize that I wasn't just dealing with a grudge-holding ex. I was also dealing with kids caught in the crossfire of loyalty, guilt, and expectations they never asked for. The very next weekend, I overheard a phone call. My oldest stepdaughter was sitting on the porch, phone pressed to her ear, whispering like she didn't want me to hear. But I caught pieces of it. She was telling her dad that I was being unfair, that I refused to apologize, and that she didn't know how much longer she could handle the tension. My heart sank. It wasn't the words that broke me, but the sound of her voice so small, so torn, like she was forced to pick sides in a war she never started. When she came back inside, I tried to talk to her. I told her she didn't have to carry this burden, that no matter what her father felt about me, my door would always be open to her. But she just shrugged. Eyes full of tears, she didn't dare want to sit, and mumbled something about needing peace. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was the villain in her story. Then came the moment that changed everything. Their father, my wife's ex, showed up at our house, unannounced. I didn't know he was coming until I heard the knock and opened the door to see him standing there, arms crossed, jaw tight. My wife froze. The kids rushed to him like soldiers finding their commander. And me? I felt like the outsider I had always feared I was. He didn't ask to come in. He just stood on the porch and said, "I think you owe me something." My blood ran cold. The kids stood behind him, their wide eyes flicking between us like they were watching the final round of a heavyweight match. My wife tried to defuse it, but he held his hand up to silence her. His gaze never left mine. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could have swallowed my pride and muttered an apology just to keep the peace. Or I could have stood my ground, refused to bow, and risked losing the fragile bond I had built with his children. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. My mouth went dry, but I forced myself to speak. "I don't owe you anything," I said, steady but quiet. "I've treated your kids with love. I've been there when you weren't. I don't need your approval." The silence that followed was suffocating. His face twisted in anger. But before he could respond, My stepdaughter shouted, "Stop it, both of you." Her voice cracked, and tears streamed down her face. She begged us to stop making her feel like she had to choose. My wife pulled her close, but I stood frozen, guilt and anger battling inside me. After he left, slamming the door behind him, the house felt broken. My stepchildren wouldn't even look at me. My wife tried to console me, saying I did the right thing by standing my ground, but my heart was heavy. I wasn't sure if I had protected my dignity or shattered the trust I had worked so hard to earn. Days turned into weeks, and the atmosphere in our home was thick with unspoken words. The kids withdrew. They weren't rude, but they weren't warm either. They stayed in their rooms more, answered me in short phrases, and kept their distance. And that distance hurt more than any words their father had thrown at me. One evening, I found a note slipped under my door. It was from my stepdaughter. Her handwriting was messy, the ink smudged by what I could only guess were tears. It said, "I don't know what to do anymore. I love you, but I love Dad too. Why can't you both just say sorry and make it stop?" Reading that broke something inside me. It wasn't about pride anymore, or about being right or wrong. It was about children being forced into battles they didn't deserve. I realized then that my fight wasn't really with their father, it was with my own ego. But here's the question I wrestled with, night after night. If I apologized, even if I didn't mean it, would it really solve anything? Or would it just teach the kids that peace only comes when you surrender your truth? I wanted to protect them, yes, but I also wanted to show them that you can stand tall in the face of that dignity matters, even when it's hard. Still, the note haunted me. I couldn't shake the image of her writing it, hands trembling, tears falling onto the page. That was when I realized the true costs of this feud. It wasn't my pride, or his bitterness, or even the arguments with my wife. The real cost was the innocence of these children who just wanted to feel safe in both homes. So I sat them down. All of them. I told them the truth, not the filtered version, not the sugar-coated one, but the raw truth. I told them I loved them like my own. I told them I would never replace their father, but I would always be here to support them. And then I told them something that made their eyes widen in surprise. I can't apologize for things I haven't done, but I can promise you this: I will never speak badly about your father again. No matter what, and I will never ask you to pick sides. The room was quiet. No one moved, but I saw the tension in their shoulders ease just a little. My wife reached for my hand, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe there was hope. Still, deep down, I knew this story wasn't over. The battle lines had been drawn long before I entered the picture, and I was just another soldier in a war I didn't start. But now, I had to find a way to fight without hurting the ones I loved most. And that meant learning when to speak, when to stay silent, and when to let go of battles that didn't belong to me. Because in the end, it wasn't about winning against their father. It was about protecting their hearts. Welcome back to Life Stories Network, where we dive into the messy, the raw, and the unforgettable stories of family, love, and loyalty. If you've followed this journey from the beginning, you know that my life as a step-parent has been anything but easy. And this last part of the story brings everything to a powerful, emotional close. After that talk with the kids, something shifted. It wasn't a magical fix, but the heaviness in the house started to lift, little by little. My stepdaughter, who had written me the note, began talking to me again. Not much at first, but enough to let me know she hadn't shut me out completely. My stepson even asked me to help him with his homework one night, and though it seemed small, it felt like a huge step forward. But there was still an elephant in the room, their father. His presence, even when he wasn't physically there, hung over us like a dark cloud. Every time the kids visited him and came back, I braced myself for the cold stares, the clipped responses, the lingering tension. It was exhausting, living in a constant cycle of rebuilding their trust only to see it crack again after every weekend visit. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, I finally let myself break down in front of my wife. I told her how much it hurt to always feel like the outsider, how hard it was to love kids who might never fully accept me because of a father who couldn't stand me. I told her how tempted I had been, more than once, to just say I'm sorry. To her ex, even if I didn't mean it, just so the kids could breathe. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said something I'll never forget. If you apologize when you haven't done anything wrong, you're not teaching them peace. You're teaching them to sacrifice themselves for someone else's comfort, and that's not the lesson they need. Her words hit me like a thunderbolt, because she was right. These kids needed to learn resilience, not compliance. They needed to see that standing firm in your truth doesn't mean you don't allow others. It means you respect yourself enough not to live a lie. Still, I couldn't shake the guilt. Every time I saw the sadness in their eyes, I wondered if my refusal to apologize was making their lives harder. And then something unexpected happened. It was during a family dinner, just us and the kids, when my stepson suddenly blurted out, "Dad said you'll never be man enough to say sorry." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My wife dropped hers. The air turned heavy. I braced myself for anger, but instead, I saw something in his eyes: confusion, not hatred. He wasn't throwing those words at me to wound me. He was repeating them because he didn't understand. So I put my fork down, looked him in the eye, and said, "Do you know why I won't apologize to you, Dad?" He shook his head. My stepdaughter leaned in, curious too, and that's when I told them the truth, in the simplest way I could. Because saying sorry when you haven't done anything wrong isn't real. If I said it, it wouldn't fix anything. It would just be words. But what I can do is show you every day that I care about you, that I'll be there for you, that I'll protect you. That's the way I say. Sorry for the pain this whole situation causes, not with words, but with actions. The kids were quiet, really quiet, and I could see them thinking hard about what I'd said. My wife reached for my hand under the table, and for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, they understood me. The real breakthrough came a few weeks later. My stepdaughter, the one who had been torn up by the tension, came to me late at night. She sat on the edge of my bed and whispered, "I know you're not the bad guy." My chest tightened. She looked so small, so tired, but in her eyes, I saw relief. She said she hated being in the middle, that she wished her dad and I could just get along, but that she knew I wasn't the one making it worse. Primera hugged air, and I swear I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't about winning her over, it was about her finally seeing my heart. From that day on, things weren't perfect, but they were better. The kids started to separate their love for their dad from their relationship with me. They stopped asking me to apologize, because they realized the apology they wanted wasn't really about me, it was about fixing something broken between their parents. Something that wasn't Tamina Tufek's. And as for their father, well, his opinion of me never changed. He still glares when he sees me, still mutters under his breath, still tries to paint me as the villain. But here's what I learned. His hate doesn't define me. His bitterness isn't my burden, and his refusal to move on will never erase the love I've built in this home. I'm not saying it's easy. Being a step-parent is like walking through a battlefield with no armor. You'll take hits that weren't meant for you. You'll get blamed for wars you didn't start. And sometimes, no matter how much love you give, it will never feel like enough. But here's the truth. You don't need to be perfect to make a difference. You just need to be consistent, honest, and real. In the end, I never gave that man the apology he wanted, and I never will. Not out of spite, but out of respect for myself and for the kids who are watching me every day, learning what it means to stand tall even when the world wants you to bow. Because sometimes, the greatest lesson we can teach the next generation isn't how to avoid conflict, it's how to face it with dignity, with love, and with courage. So to anyone out there walking this path, wondering if you're failing because your stepkids don't see you the way you wish they would, hear me when I say this. Love doesn't always look like a fairy tale. Sometimes it looks like late-night talks, or quiet acts of care, or simply showing up again and again even when you're not sure you're wanted. That's what love is. That's what family is. And in my heart, I know this. One day, when they're older, when they've had time to reflect, my stepchildren will look back and realize I wasn't the enemy. I was the one who stayed, the one who didn't give up, the one who loved them even when love was complicated. And that will be enough.